Let me give you the history. As I say, I was raised a Catholic, married an Episcopalian, and found out I was Jewish. So, the bottom line is this: is that how the whole story evolved. I was at the UN and got to be a fairly well-known public figure, which means, I think the governors will understand this, is getting letters from people that want things. And so among them, I would get letters from people who'd say, I'm your relative, send money, or I need a visa, or there would be letters that had various things in them that would say, I went to high school with your father in 1915, which would have been impossible since he was born in 1909, or the dates were wrong, the names of the villages were wrong. But in kind of like November 96, just as I was being vetted to be Secretary of State, I got a letter that had all the names right and the villages and the dates right, saying, my family knew your family to be a fine Jewish family. So I was in with the White House lawyers, and they were asking me the normal questions like, had I paid my taxes, did I have a nanny, those kind of things. So then towards the end of it, they said, we ask this question of everybody. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that we should ask you that you might want to tell us? And I said, well, it's perfectly possible that I'm of Jewish background. And they said, so what? The president is not anti-Semitic. So then over the holidays, I discussed it with my 3 daughters and son-in-laws, and they loved my parents, and they always thought that we had a fairly complicated story, and they wanted to know more, and they were fascinated by it. So then what happens is you are not allowed to talk to the press between the time that you are named and you're confirmed. But there's a reporter, Michael Dobbs from the Washington Post, who wanted to do a profile of me. So my office gave him names of people to talk to. And the first week that I was Secretary of State, he comes into my office and starts presenting me with these disgusting documents, which were the Nazi records of when people were sent to concentration camps. And he said, this was your cousin, this was, and I'm, just absolutely stunned and appalled. It's one thing to find out you're Jewish, and it's another to find out that many members of your family were sent to concentration camps. This may sound weird at this point, but I was trying to prove that a woman could be Secretary of State. And so I couldn't take off and do anything about this, but I asked my brother and sister to go to the Czech Republic and begin to try to find out the story. And they worked with a man who's now become a very good friend, Thomas Kraus, who was head of the Jewish community in Prague. And they began to piece the story together. And the only way I can describe how I felt at the time was, my parents, by the way, were dead long during this, and I felt as if I had been the first woman ever asked to represent my country in a marathon, and that just as I was starting to run, somebody gave me a heavy package and said, unwrap it while you run. Mm-hmm. So that was what I was trying to figure out, how to deal with that. And so ultimately, I felt that more needed to be done with the story. The hardest part about this is one of the things you just asked, which is people were very critical of my parents and very critical of me and thought, how could this person be so stupid as not to ask? There is no particular way to explain this except that I had no missing pieces in my story. Why would you ask something that, my parents talked a lot about their lives in Czechoslovakia. They talked about Christmas and how they got ready for Easter. And there were why would you ask anything? That was the main thing. Why didn't they tell me? I don't know the answer to this. I really don't. I can only speculate. What happened was, according to records that came out, is we were all baptized in 1941 in England after we were out. So they clearly didn't have me baptized to escape the Holocaust. We were already out. And so I presume that they felt that it would be better for their child at the time, to be Christian. It didn't seem that is not a very hard conclusion to reach. Why didn't they tell us when we came to the United States? And I think this is the other part. We came to the United States in 1949, 50, getting our citizenship during the McCarthy era. My father had for a short period of time, worked for a communist government. He didn't report to the communist government, but that was already an issue. And then I think the main thing from knowing my parents is that they figured, why did they have to load their children down with the great pain that they had felt through this? But I can't, I can only speculate on it. I can only know what my parents were like, that protectiveness was their main thing. Everybody had died, and I think they were trying to make a new life. That is the only explanation I can make.